There's no football on. I mean, yeah, there's some sort of four quarters soccer bullshit going on in America where they're ruining the beautiful game. I mean, I suppose we're all keeping an eye on the 9 Spurs players away at the World Cup, and we're salivating over all the emerging stars we're not going to buy. Micky played at left back for Holland to accommodate Van Hecke. The transfer farce du jour is a redux. Van de Ven said that when we were struggling, he was too anxious to leave the house. So while fans were saying he didn't care, he was dealing with mental health issues. It's easy to forget players are human. Brighton are apparently sniffing around Luka Vuskovic. Is that true? Gary has suggested a £30 million fee, which feels less like a transfer bid and more like a passive-aggressive poke in the ribs. The ITK accounts are reporting that Tottenham want to do something, and I quote, important in midfield. Are we signing a generational talent or just relaying the centre circle? There's Alex Scott, isn't there? Are we after him? He's Spurs, isn't he? Is that true? Who knows? Let me tell you who doesn't know. ITKs. The Supporters Trust sent a pompous letter to Chairman Peter Charrington about their squad requirements and ambitions. I'm sure Peter asked around about how many players there are in a squad and whether ambition was the same as profit before filing it in the shredder. Julie will give us the lowdown on the great Cliff Jones, who received his MBE just the 60 years too late. We've got Room 101, some other fun stuff, plus news of a very special guest on next week's pod. I'll give you a clue. It's Steve Perryman. All right, strap in. It's Nice One, Cyril.
Nice one, Cyril.
So, welcome to Nice One, Cyril. I'm Simon Lipson, whose idea it was to start this podcast last August, so I've only got myself to blame. Julie Welch, who's been watching Spurs since before most of our Spurs traumas were a twinkle in our parents' eyes. Kevin Acott, whose pet phrase is, I don't know, which is silly really, Kev, because we all know you don't know. And Barry Graham, a die-hard Scottish Spurs fan, go figure. I hope there's a support group. Welcome, one and all. Well, here we are. Lots to get our teeth into. First of all, let's start with Julie. Not all of our 9 players have played yet, and the only one that really matters, of course, is Jed Spence. Have you been impressed with any of our boys' performances? I mentioned Van de Ven. He didn't look all that comfortable at left back.
I kind of got to half-time and thought it's time for bed. So I think I missed his yellow card, which was about the only kind of thing which sticks in the memory. So not incredibly impressed, but then Holland are pretty crap anyway, aren't they, these days? And of course he was playing alongside his possible new mate, Paul Van Hecke, or John Paul Van Hecke even, and kind of not impressed there either. So yeah, that's as far as I've got so far.
Okay. I mean, there was some talk about Van Hecke looking quite good and Van de Ven looking really not very good. In his defence, Barry out of position. But so far, I mean, it's very hard kind of getting your teeth into this tournament, isn't it? You know, it feels like, inhospitable times and it's all a bit spread out, all a bit bloated. We've got nonsenses like Curacao and, I don't know, even smaller islands and little bits of space where they've managed to find 11 blokes who can kick a football. It doesn't feel yet like there's any great tension or excitement about this World Cup.
No, true. I mean, it's slightly different up here. The frenzy in the build-up to Saturday night's game's just enormous. I mean, it's gone complete meltdown. The 2 kind of evening news programmes for 2-3 days leading up to it was, wall to wall and the fans and everything, but slightly different for Scotland not having been there for 28 years. And I am slightly jet lagged. I felt obliged to watch at 2 a.m. on Sunday. I'm not a massive international football fan at all, but like the country was. And for Scotland, it is a wee bit different. As I say, I'm not diehard Tartan Army by any means, but people are just talking about football who wouldn't normally do. It's slightly different for you guys. It comes around every 2 years as a Euros or a World Cup. I mean, my main interest in Scotland game was, a more trained eye than usual on Andy Robertson. And what stuck out for me was he does put in a good ball. There's no doubt about that. And it's just nice having a Spurs interest in the national team. But like most people, I kind of find I view everything through a Spurs kind of prism. And, that's really the interest in terms of the World Cup for me, our players, who we might sign. And that's how I see it. Fortunately, had we been relegated, I don't think I could have faced this, because just the wall-to-wall football for 6 weeks, it would have been unbearable. People who are not normally interested in football getting interested. And I would still be in a state of kind of PTSD. Still kind of am, but it's now a kind of pleasant light relief. Whereas it would have just been triggering football. It's horrible. I hate it. Whereas now it's just kind of, 6 weeks without Spurs. That's quite nice. But we can just about live with it.
There was an interesting tweet. We've got plenty of stupid tweets for you. This was somebody tweeting about Robertson. He said, Robertson, who's been washed for 2 years, getting absolutely skinned down the left every time Haiti attacked by League One wingers. I told you, happy clapper mediocrity-loving clowns. He's third choice at best. It's a bit unfair, isn't it, Kev?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm not an Andy Robertson expert, but when I've seen him over the last few years, he's a bloody good player. So he's now a slightly too old bloody good player, possibly. But yeah, at the moment, I'm thinking he's gonna improve the squad. So sometimes I just think young people, by which I mean anyone under 50, shouldn't be allowed to comment on football.
50? I'd say 60.
Yeah, or 60.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, and it's a very uncharitable comment. And I didn't watch any of the game. I haven't even seen the goal. But I would say that I think we said this before on the pod. I think he's a reasonably good addition to the squad, Andy Robertson. But what you really want is Andy Robertson's quality on the ball, crossing, and everything else from Destiny Udogie. Unfortunately, we don't have the perfect left back. Let's have a little chat about who we've seen. Julie, there was a guy whose name I've completely forgotten now, played for Morocco, who's about 18. Aboudi? Oh, God, I've forgotten his name. Who I thought looked stupendously good against Brazil. I just wonder, whether, he's the kind of kid you buy him and he turns out to be Mate Sarr.
Well, yeah. The trouble is that a player who shows up well in the World Cup and who is that age, immediately, you want to sign him. I mean, for some reason, I'm linking this back to Velis, who has gone elsewhere. And we all got terribly excited about him, didn't we? Was it only 2 years back, 3 years back, something like that? And just another one who sort of passed completely unnoticed in the end. The trouble with this World Cup, I mean, it's just on at such bloody awful time. I mean, as somebody who kind of goes off the radar at about 10 o'clock, anything I want to watch is beyond that is right out. I feel kind of a bit like Barry, actually. I'm just watching in the sort of serenity of not being relegated at the moment. And just turn on the telly and there's a football match going on. Oh, and it's, some kid in a brightly coloured shirt from some country doing interesting and nice things. Maybe we'll sign him. Oh, it's time for bed. I'm sure I'll get a lot more excited, as time goes on.
Well, I imagine that as Jed Spence leads us to the final and glory in the final, you'll
Yeah,
be taking a firm interest.
he's going to be absolutely insufferable, isn't he?
Yes, he is. I tell you what, we this always happens, Barry, that you watch a major tournament and somebody or certain players emerge and you think, God, blimey, where's he even? Never heard of him. It happens less frequently now because we kind of know everybody. You know, back in the day when you watch Brazil, 1970, they were all these exotic, unknown characters doing remarkable things. Now we know everybody, but someone always, you know, was it Poborski emerged from one of the Euros, and everyone thought, what a player. And Man United bought him, and he wasn't all that. Another player who emerged, and I mentioned this now, I'm segueing quite brilliantly, to be honest with you, Gakpo. He emerged at the last World Cup as a sort of a goal-scoring wide striker. And there is talk now that, I guess, and it is just talk, that we're interested in Gakpo. Do you have a view on, A, the likelihood, and B, the desirability of bringing Gakpo in?
I think when you compare him to the other strikers we've been linked with, you know, Delat and forget who else I heard mentioned, there wasn't anything really to grab you. Yeah, you do have to be wary of World Cups. I remember in '94 we get Dumitrescu and Popescu off the back of that. Do you remember? And varying degrees of success. People can have great World Cups and then not a lot thereafter. I suspect it's probably unlikely Gakpo, but I would probably would take him, to be honest. He's got something about it. Doesn't score enough goals probably, but then I can't remember a time where there's been fewer kind of out and out goal scorers on the market that are within reach. I mean, maybe it's partly the game's changing and wingers are scoring more goals and there's less emphasis on a 25 goal a season striker. Everyone's expected to chip in. But yeah, that is our problem area. We have to, I mean, if we're assuming Muani's going, and I think we should cash in on Rishi, if Julie, that's not heresy to you. So I think we have to keep Solanke, but his injury record, I quite like Solanke, but when he's fit, we need to get someone in. And to me, that's the big problem position. And there's no obvious names. Maybe Rashford has heard been mentioned as well. But someone with a bit of Premier League pedigree. Harry Kane would be nice. He's quite useful.
He's a bit old. Old for me.
Yeah. But to me, that's our main problem position, I think.
I agree with you. I mean, it's interesting. You mentioned Rashford there, Kev. I mean, I realised as Barry said Rashford, I turned my nose up, and I don't know why, because actually he's a kid that played in the right position, and you know he can finish for a start off. And in the absence of people with the requisite speed and skill and finishing ability, we could do a lot worse than him. I'm not saying that's a likelihood, but he's all right, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he's more than all right potentially. I think he could be a really good signing. I had a conversation with my otherwise nice Arsenal supporting colleague this morning, and she was sort of gloating about the fact that Gyökeres and Havertz have both scored. And I pointed out who they'd scored against, obviously. But she sort of said, because she didn't like my response really, but they're both better than Richarlison. And I thought, yeah, you're right. I obviously didn't say to her, yes, you're right. But she's right. And it just sort of exposed the fact that even if somehow we actually signed Havertz or Gyökeres, the team would improve. And that's a bit depressing, really. You know, that absence of, and it's not just an absence of a really good striker, it's the absence of Kane that's still there, isn't it? You know, that massive Kane-shaped gap up front. We absolutely have to buy someone and buy someone good in that position. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the fact that you were churlish enough to say to your friend, yeah, but look who they scored against. It's
Yes.
really good, a great effort on your part. And
Thank you.
but in the end, of course, you had to bow to the truth. There was some talk, isn't there, Julie, about Vlahovic. I mean, we've got Vuskovic. We'll come to him later, but we've got Vlahovic, who's leaving some Spanish, some Italian team. I don't know. His stock seems to have fallen, but I don't know. When he was really on fire, he looked like a pretty decent player. Is that a viable possibility, or such more Gary of Harlow bullshit?
I think that's more Garyism. I mean, I also heard the mention of the name Thiago, who I'd be much more enthusiastic about because he really is a good player. And I also looked with mounting horror at the suggestion that Spurs were interested in Delap, who is the biggest thug since Vinnie Jones, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, apart from that, Vinnie Jones was actually quite talented. Delap, as Brian Clough used to say, he can't fucking play.
He's one of those players who looks like his feet are actually glued to the mud, right? He looks like he can't run, and he's just a big lumbering oaf.
He is, of course, a math genius, allegedly.
Yes,
but
he is.
I mean, that's not much use in the penalty area, is it? I mean,
you say that. I mean, he probably keeps count of the number of times he's elbowed someone in the jaw, and he can multiply that by the number of times he's raked his studs down someone's Achilles. I mean, it's got its uses. Let's have a little chat about our centre back position, Barry. Now, someone put up a graphic the other day on Twitter. We've got 11 of them. Name them. Go.
Oh Christ! You put me in the spot. Okay. Danso, Romero, Van der Ven, Ashley Phillips, Senesi. Oh, Vuskovic, obviously, is the one we're coming to.
Mike England.
Mike England. Good one. Thanks, Kev. Dragusin?
Of course, Dragusin, yeah. Who's got to be one of the ones who goes out, I think.
Byfield.
Byfield, right? Yeah. I don't know how many we've covered there. Not enough, is my view. Ben Davis, I think, might have been in that graphic, so it's a bit tenuous. Why have we got so many centre backs, and who are we going to settle on? Because we only probably, actually, going on Spurs' past injury performance, we probably need all 11. But let's say we need 4 with a 5th who can play fullback and play somewhere else if need be. Who would you settle on?
Well, I think the consensus, everyone I've heard, is Romero go and get what we can for him. Although I suspect his value will have come down in the last year. Had we flogged him last year, we'd have got a lot more. So Dragusin and he goes. I think Phillips, we need to kind of, he's done quite well, but clearly they don't fancy him. They've never taken him back. I think try and get, 15 million for him, if you can 10, 15 million as a solid championship performer. I would like, Senesi, Van der Ven, if we can persuade him to stay, if we've got Van Hecke, and then Senesi. So there's 4. The one that worries me is Vuskovic.
I think you've got 2 Senesis there. I'm not sure.
Sorry, Senesi.
I don't know.
Van der Ven, Van Hecke, and Danso. There we go.
Yeah.
4.
Okay, so those are 4 reliable, Premier League experienced players. So that leaves us, Kev, with Vuskovic. Now, lots of talk this week about this uber-talented kid, allegedly. Brighton supposedly made a bid of 30 million for him, which is, it seemed to me, it's almost like if it's true, it seemed to me like a snub to Spurs, as if to say, stop lowballing us about Van Hecke. Who knows the truth of any of this? But there is quite a strong body of opinion that suggests that if we let this kid go now, we are losing a potential world superstar. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to have him all these years since he was 16 and then to decide we don't want him anymore.
No, it does. It doesn't make sense. And I suspect we don't know what his contract is. We don't know how he feels about the club really, or about De Zerbi, or do you know what I mean? Things have changed since he came to us. He's obviously had a really good time in Germany. I don't know. I've seen clips of him and I've read reports of him, and he does sound potentially incredibly good. So it doesn't seem to make sense. It doesn't seem to make sense from his point of view to go to Brighton, really.
Although they're much better than us.
They are much better than us. Yeah, and I didn't mean that in a sort of sneering at Brighton way, but it doesn't feel sense. It almost would make more sense to do another year on loan, then sort of come to us, and then if he's good enough, potentially move to a really big club. But
There's
who
some
knows?
suggestion, isn't there, that he might go, that we might offer him on loan to Brighton as a sweetener for the Van Hecke deal, and then bring him back or sell him on at that point. Who knows? Let's, Julie, we've got to address some incredibly disappointing news this week, which is that Porro has signed a new contract. And sorry, I can't keep a straight face. Look, we've given Porro a hell of a hammering on this pod. We might be in a bit of a minority here because he does seem to be highly rated by all and sundry. I don't get it. He did improve under RDZ, no doubt about that. Maybe RDZ got into his head and told him to stop being an idiot and stop letting people run past him and stuff. How do you feel about that? Because it to me, this is what I think. It suggests to me that he's going to be the new captain.
Well, for a start, I'm absolutely delighted because
I know you are.
He's signed a 5-year contract with possibility of an extension, which we've got. So we've got 6 more years potentially of taking the piss out of Porro. So what are you moaning about? Honestly,
True. Good point.
He's got very nice teeth. Have you seen the picture that he posted? Lovely white gnashes, as I think it was you, Simon, who suggested, he'd borrowed them from Klopp. What's not to like? I can see why he's been quite good if he wasn't so annoying. But, I mean, we had Thomas Frank calling him the only elite player at Spurs. Obviously, De Zerbi wouldn't have sanctioned keeping hold of him if he didn't rate him. So I just wonder, what have we been missing?
Yeah, and apparently, Man City like him, Real Madrid liked him. It's a mystery to me, this one, but we don't watch him in training every day. Perhaps we just don't get it. I mean, Barry, there was a bit of film of him on YouTube in celebrating his retention or re-signing, and it was all of his goals, and there aren't that many of them, but nearly all of his goals are great. Long ranges and that little header he got against, was it Leeds? And, he's got ability, and that's the frustrating thing with him. And I'm going to add into that mix now Bissouma, who I just don't know whether we've ever quite seen the best of either of these guys.
Well, we certainly haven't with Bissouma, but I think be gone with him. I'm delighted he's gone. He's just I think he's a bad egg. He turned up in the Europa League final. Fair play to him.
Yeah,
but he can't keep messing up like he's done and letting the team down. No, I think we did the right thing there. Getting back to Porro, he always reminds me of a young Freddie Mercury. I don't know. There's something about him. Am I the only one who thinks that? He is very frustrating, but all the stats, you look at them in terms of chances created for us, he is very important from that perspective. You remember the shit balls that are overhit and go straight out, and you're thinking, what are you doing? But he does have it, I'm going to use that terrible phrase, in his locker, which is a room 101, I'm sure. But you know what I mean? He can put in a good set piece. And I think if we have him on one side and, well, I suppose a dog gave him a number and choice, but if you get Robertson on the other as well, you get potential good delivery from both flanks. I think what annoys folk most about Porro is a wee bit like Vicario, this pointing the finger at other people, the histrionics, doesn't take responsibility for his own mistakes, and a wee bit over the top kind of chest thumping when he makes a good tackle or something like that. It's a bit performative. But on balance, fine with it. I think he's...
Yeah.
There are a lot worse players at club, and I think he does contribute a lot, although he can be a pain in the arse as well.
Yeah, he's earned the sobriquet performative Pedro on this podcast, and I think it. Yes, I hear what you say. Let's have a little talk about Micky van der Ven. And I'm coming to you on this, Kev. He said well, I'm not going to give you everything he said, but he said this: when Spurs secured safety, it literally felt like I was 100 kilos lighter. All the stress was gone immediately. At a certain point, I didn't even go outside anymore. I would think, do I actually deserve to do fun things? You want to turn things around at all costs. Now, this sort of gives the lie, doesn't it, to the idea that footballers don't care, that they are selfish, and in this particular case, that he was going to, cut and run as soon as the season was over, come what may. I think this bespeaks a guy who cares. He does care. And even if it's just professional pride talking, there's something there that I find quite touching. But it also reminds us, doesn't it, that players are human beings, and that, we are so easy to, we even taking the piss out of Pedro. Maybe he's been struggling with things and carrying burdens that we don't know about. It's possibly time we address that and let footballers be human.
Yeah, and it was and thinking again, I've been one of those who's, even on this podcast had to go at Richarlison, and we know that Richarlison has had fairly major sort of mental health problems. And I can't quite put myself in, say, Van der Ven's position, except to think if while I was at work, people are just around me commenting on everything that I do constantly and getting it wrong, and that those people are not as good at my job as I am, and I have some kind of sensitivity and some kind of vulnerability, then it must be really, really hard. I mean, I'm thinking about people who you suspect haven't had those periods like Van der Ven has. We were talking about Cristiano Ronaldo today. You suspect he hasn't had those doubts. There's just so much focus. But I think he's quite rare, and also, as we know, in all sorts of different ways, quite an unpleasant person as well. So I don't know. I think social media in particular is putting and has started putting so much more pressure on footballers than they ever have had, and this constant judgment, this constant, for people like we're doing now, judging them, not just judging their performance as footballers, but also judging their character and their motivation. And so, it's right. I know we'll keep doing it, but it does. We do need to take that step back, I think, and just see the person as well as the footballer, regardless of whether they earn hundreds of thousands of pounds a month.
Yeah, in a way that just feels irrelevant. They paid a lot because it's incredibly high profile. They're incredibly exposed to, lunatics on social media and everywhere else you go. I mean, imagine turning out in front of 60,000 people every week and being shit and having a bad day. And I mentioned this, Julie, your mate Flappy. Now, right, we've taken the piss out of Flappy quite a lot on here. And it occurs to me that, here's a guy who came to us full of confidence, actually, and we all thought he was going to be a real boon. It's very clear, isn't it, that he lost confidence, that he lost belief in his ability to kick the ball and to catch the ball. When he got buffeted, I think that was almost the turning point for him. Was it against City and then Arsenal? And you could see a guy actually crumbling under the pressure.
I know it's a cliche, but as we said, players are human beings. And a neuroscientist I know, who's a sports psychologist, did say that every footballer is actually afraid. I mean, they've got every right to be where they are. It's almost imposter syndrome. I don't want to sort of turn this into something about me, but when I was a working football reporter, I was in my early 20s particularly, and I did get a lot of people commenting, not always in a good way, about what I did. And I felt that, I wanted to give up. And I think there is that fear that once you're in an elevated position, that's when the fear sets in. I admire Micky van der Ven for his honesty, actually, in saying what he was feeling, because a lot of men wouldn't say that.
Yeah. Yeah, he made himself vulnerable there, and I think that was laudable. And the thing to remember here, and I think Julie makes the great point there about herself, Barry, is that they're very young men. They're very young men under, facing intense scrutiny. They're very well paid, and the average person watching them is, thinking, well, you get 150, 200 grand a week. I expect perfection. And it really doesn't work like that, because ultimately, as Julie says, they're just human beings. They have shit days. When I was 24, I was just qualified as a solicitor, God help me. And I didn't know fucking anything. Mind you, I still don't know fucking anything, but I felt so hopeless and out of my depth. I wasn't being scrutinized by 60,000 people in a stadium or millions on TV.
A couple of things. You could see all the team, what Micky van der Ven's talking about, that was visible and evident through that period, that, as each week went past without a win, and the number of games without a win was totting up, you could see the confidence draining from them, and no one taking a risk, and sideways passes, and scared to do anything wrong. And that's entirely natural. I think the vulnerability that he's spoken about is kind of something we can all empathise with in our professional lives, but also watching that team. I don't wish him having suffered poor mental health, but it almost shows that he does really care, and they went through what they really put us through. I mean, we all experienced that, not wanting to go out stuff. I mean, I'm almost moved on enough to view it in the past, but there's still a bit of it is still with me and present. And I think folk who are detached, don't understand football, or particularly not into Spurs, can appreciate just how, tortuous a few months it was for us as fans. And then if you're the players at the centre of that, you're the ones, as it were, failing and letting everyone down. You can get that.
Yeah.
I mean, just speaking about myself, I wish I was one of the people who I admire, would like to be more like professionally, though I don't really respect them, is the bullshit merchants, the people who don't have imposter syndrome, who just, these people professionally who just talk their way out of anything and talk a good game and just feel. I've always been a kind of vulnerable, sort of self-doubting person. Mm-hmm. I don't like it, and I wish I was more kind of one of these bullshitters. Yeah. But I kind of like that about Micky, and I'm assuming it's genuine and it's not, affected for the fans. That's why the Wolves thing was so important, getting over the line. It was a terrible performance. We just had to get that win, and it kick-started things. You hope the scars aren't there next season for them all.
Yeah.
Particularly if we have a bad start. That's, is there lingering kind of PTSD? I guess we'll find out next season.
We will indeed. It's interesting. You mentioned, Kev, about Ronaldo, he's a quite fascinating character. He's unbelievably driven and self-centered. There was a bit of film of him that turned up on my social media feed this week of other players scoring when he was close by, and him looking utterly disappointed and pissed off that he didn't get the final touch. So much so, and this may just be the poster arriving at conclusions that probably weren't right, but there were moments when someone else scored and he put his hand up for offside against his own team. I don't know. It's worth watching that. He is utterly self-absorbed, but maybe that's how he's made himself such a great player. Let's move on. Now, I mentioned in the opening monologue, Kev, the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust sent a letter to Spurs chairman Peter Charrington, the great man himself, setting out their requirements of the club in terms of squad and ambition, all the rest of it. I can't imagine this moved him greatly. I do wonder a bit about the THST. I've looked them up. They seem, they've got 27,000 members. They do seem to carry the opinion of a lot of fans. But also I felt like, who the fuck are you lot to be writing letters demanding X, Y, and Z from the club? Not least because the club don't care really what you think, even if they've acknowledged your existence.
I am actually a member, and I did.
Of course you are.
I did fill in their little questionnaire, and I was fine with both those things. And then when they came out with this is the letter we've sent to, which was pretty consistent with what I felt overall, it did feel. I just thought, oh God, why have you done that? Why have you bothered? So I was sort of holding both opinions there, because it seemed pointless. It also seemed almost ill-timed as well, and a little bit naive, like a sort of teenager talking to the father, and getting really worried about what we're going to say, and then saying it not particularly well, and father pretending to listen but not really. I don't know. It seemed silly. It did seem silly. I read something. I wrote it down and now I've lost it. But I saw a thing today about Ange Postecoglou, and one of those AI written things that have lots of very short, abrupt sentences. And one of them was, and then he went to Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, a North London club, famous for its demanding supporters. And I thought, we're not, are we? We're the least demanding group of support. We've put up with so much. And we don't really demand very much, and we've allowed them to get away with it. And it just feels like that letter, the THST letter, was sort of part of that, being a bit demanding, but not really. It did feel a bit pathetic, really. I do want to say, I don't think it came from a bad place, but I just think it was a bit naive. Politically naive.
Yeah, absolutely. Unquestionably well-intentioned. And as I said, I think it kind of speaks for what most of us are thinking. But at the same time, I don't know, approaching a club with that, it just felt incredibly puerile to me. Let's move on. Now, Julie, Cliff Jones was awarded an MBE. This was in the last week. He's 91. He stopped playing about 60 years ago. It feels a bit late in the day to recognise his achievements, although I think it's for other achievements as well. Tell us a bit about Cliff Jones.
I actually made some notes on this, and I headed my notes, nice one, Cliff. So as you say, 91, gets his gong at 91. That whole double side should have been given a gong when they actually did it, because it was such an outstanding thing. And Danny Blanchflower should have got a knighthood for it. But of course, nobody gave footballers any sort of acknowledgement back then. Cliff, one of the loveliest people you could ever meet. He was John White's best pal. I interviewed him when I was writing The Ghost of White Hart Lane. I had such a touching interview with Cliff. He said, ashamed to say, I cried. And I thought, that was just a man of his time. It was so moving, so bad for him. He'd lost his best mate, and he sort of, he was so ashamed of actually weeping for his pal. Lovely, lovely man. When I look at his stats, let's have a look. So 159 goals in 378 games for Spurs, 59 caps for Wales, 16 goals. He went to the 1958 World Cup. So I think that was probably the first time Wales was ever in the World Cup. And they reached quarterfinals. They were knocked out by Pele's Brazil. He was such a magnificent player. He really was. And he was incredibly brave. If you look at early photos of him, when he'd signed from Swansea, where he played at their old stadium, the Vetch Field, he had actually quite a straight nose. He was so brave. He would do those diving headers, and his nose just got more and more crooked over the years, because he just put his head where other people wouldn't put their boots, basically. He had some really interesting family connections as well, because his dad, Ivor, and his uncle Bryn both played for Wales, and he was also related to a guy called Ken Jones, who was, for a long time, was a reporter for the Mirror. So I knew Kenny Jones quite well. When he left Spurs, he went on to be a PE teacher. Because he was so friendly with John White, after John was killed by lightning, he looked after John's family, including Rob White. I wouldn't say he was a second dad to Rob, but he had that kind of care for his friends' children. Rob always said he used to sort of turn up at the door when it was Christmas or something like that, and he said he'd always look like somebody from A Question of Sport, because he was always dressed in this sort of PE gear type. And the other thing is that if you remember the Farewell to the Lane match, he trotted on when he was announced, and he actually, I think he did press ups on the pitch. This was when he was 81. And he still does press ups. I mean, he's quite a lot forgetful these days, but he can still do his press ups. Just a smashing person. But as I say, 60 years too late, this guy gets a gong, and they all should have been recognised for what they did.
You mentioned there something that I think was true of so many footballers from the old days, is humility. That lack of the big I am, and I know when I used to work on radio shows back in the day, that the more the footballers were, the humbler they were. I remember meeting Jeff Hurst, who was my hero, really, and he was painfully humble. I want to talk about, you scored 3 goals, didn't you? And they were, let's talk about them. Left foot, right foot, header. He didn't really want to talk about it. It was like, I know he's probably sick and tired of talking about it, but he's just such a nice man, and so many were. And I think today it's quite rare to find a humble footballer. Let's move on. That's probably a bit tarring with the same brush. Let's forget I said that. Let's move on then. We've got a little feature for you. We're going to all give our best and worst matches we've ever seen. I'm not sure if this is to do with quality or the emotional heft of these matches, but let's have a go. Barry.
For the experience, certainly not the quality of the game, Bilbao. Just for the kind of magnitude of it, I think quality-wise, probably the night Taxi for Mycon, Bale, the Inter Milan game, that was pretty special. A couple of Kane winners, North London derbies, but for occasion it would have to be Bilbao. As we all know, the game was absolutely dreadful, but it didn't matter. Worst, probably one of the most recent, I think, that Forest game, just the 3-0 home game. Actually, we've played worse. We weren't terrible the first half, but just that was the moment I felt we were doomed, and it was just so horrifically miserable. And then didn't we have an international break, I think, as well?
Yeah.
Straight after it. Just probably the nadir of last season, which is probably the worst season. It is the worst season of my Spurs supporting life. Yeah. Straight after the best moment, if not the best season in Bilbao. So yeah, that was just horribly gloomy, and just there seemed no hope at that point.
Yeah, I mean, you could choose any number of matches from last season, couldn't you? As the nadir, and that Forest one. I remember leaving that one, and we spoke on the podcast after that, and I said, look, I've kind of made my peace with us going down because there is no hope. Kev, what have you got?
I think if you ask me, tomorrow, it would be a different answer, really. But in terms of the sort of emotional heft, the sort of one that's most memorable, rather than anything else, was the 9-0 win against Bristol Rovers in the old second division. Partly because it was like 9-0, and there's just something so mad about that, and so lovely about that, and I went there with, I might mention this on here before, I went there with my German exchange partner from school, who was a Schalke 04 supporter, and I went to Schalke when I went to Germany. I've always had a sort of soft spot for them. But I did the Yeah. No, we're usually like this. And then on the Wednesday, I think it was a cup match or a League Cup match or something. I took him again, ready for another sort of 9-0 win. And of course, we lost to Coventry at home, obviously. And that was the end of that. But there was just something so lovely about the sort of madness of a 9-0 win. So that was sort of my favourite. In terms of the worst, oddly, the first one that came to mind, by no means the worst, but I've never been so cold in my life, was at Wembley. And I hated Wembley's horrible, soulless place. I hated getting there. I hated getting away from it. Hated being there. And I've never been so cold at a football match. It was an FA Cup match. And I meant to look this up, but I think it was Rochdale. And we won.
Yes.
We won comfortably. And I've never cared less. It was just awful. It was just like a miserable day. So
a miserable day. Yeah, I luckily I avoided that one. Julie?
Well, best. Our last season at the Lane, 2016-17, and we beat Arsenal 2-0. It was in the April. Both goals at in the second half, within 2.5 minutes, because I was, you're getting really antsy, aren't you, when nothing happens and you think they're just going to do us again. And so Delhi scored, and then 2.5 minutes later, Kane scored with a pen. So that was lovely, and it was a lovely sunny day, and all was right with the world. And my worst season before, 2015-16, the Battle of the Bridge, we were 2-0 up against Chelsea. Dembele he tried to gouge Diego Costa's eyes out, and frankly, I don't blame him. I mean, who wouldn't? But he was suspended for 6 games, and that was the season, of course, when we should have won the title, but we didn't. We finished third.
Yeah. Good shout. Very good shout. I was going to go for the 81 FA Cup final replay because I was there and it was such an amazing night. But I'll go for a match I wasn't actually at, but it was the Ajax away. I know it's a pretty obvious one, but Ajax away, 2-0 down, all hope was lost. And not only that, but to score in the last minute. And a useless player scored a hat-trick. I mean, God, it's just got all the ingredients for utter joy. And the worst game for me was Man City at home in an FA Cup tie when we were leading 3-0. I think Ledley King scored it within a few minutes, and we were 3-0 up at half-time. And then Joey Barton talked himself into a red card. So they were coming out with 10 men. We had 11. We were 3-0 up. We lost it 5-3, ladies and gentlemen. That is, well, of many nadirs, Christ, that was horrific. There we are. Now, another quickie before we hit room 101. We were talking about this on our WhatsApp group. Who would we support if we didn't support Spurs? Julie?
Well, actually, I'm afraid to say I'd probably support West Ham because...
Oh, boy. Come on. That's poor.
Well, I've said, I think I've mentioned before, drop the name, Ron Greenwood, their manager at the time I was growing up, was a near neighbour of ours. I always liked going to Upton Park. Very, very, very nice press accommodation. Sandwiches were better than at Spurs. And Ron Greenwood would invite us all back to his office for a really revolting sherry after the game, if you were press. So that was lovely. And I have just happy memories of every time I went to Upton Park, as it was then. Yeah.
Was it not the Berlin ground? They don't call it the bowling ground?
Yes, it was the bowling ground. I just sort of knew it as Upton Park, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I still, I know that their supporters are largely horrible, but I would probably, if Spurs didn't exist, I would probably be a West Ham supporter, I'm afraid.
Okay. What have you got, Barry?
I don't know, it's one of these strange kind of counterfactuals. I mean, Spurs were kind of thrust on me bizarrely, or I opted for them as a kid, 81, in Glasgow. My next door neighbour had a Glenn Hoddle poster on his wall, and it was as daft as that, the 2 cup finals, and that was me hooked. I dare say if he had Souness or Dalglish in his on his wall, who were obviously, we were second best to Liverpool at that time. It could easily have been them. I would have probably been gone that way, because I wasn't pressured by, my dad wasn't particularly Celtic or Rangers. The other alternative, probably in Scotland, a lot of guys my age, if they're not old firm, you get a lot of Aberdeen and Dundee United fans. Fergie and Jim McLean, they were the kind of new firm at the time. Rangers and Celtic were both pretty shit. So I guess if I'd been as shit a Scottish glory hunter as I am an English glory hunter, I'd have gone for Aberdeen and Dundee United.
Okay.
That's the first one.
Good one, Kev.
I think it's one of two. I suspect it would be Enfield Town, the proper Enfield, because Enfield split into two, a proper club and a terrible, terrible, evil club many years ago now. It's my hometown, and before I went to Spurs, I would go to Enfield, and so they're sort of a little bit in my blood, but more in my blood in a way is Charlton. It would be Charlton Athletic, because that's my dad's team and my granddad's team. So what it wouldn't be, I was thinking, would be another Premiership team, because there's so much wrong with the Premiership and with sort of big football. If that makes sense, I would want to go down the league to support another team. So yeah, Charlton or Enfield.
Okay. Okay. And if it was me, I think it'd be Liverpool Football Club. Liverpool Football Club, because first of all, I could say Liverpool Football Club for 50 times a day, 50 Liverpool Football Club, but also because I used to live in Liverpool as a boy from the age of about 7 to 11. And although I came from East London and sort of nominally kind of kept an eye on West Ham, but when we went to Liverpool, my dad got tickets for every game. He knew the guy who did all the catering for the team. So we went to watch Liverpool Football Club. They were great. The thing about Liverpool Football Club was that they weren't all that great then. They'd won the league in the mid-60s, but we were there in 67 to 70-ish, and they were shit. They weren't shit. They were all right, but Anyway, Liverpool Football Club. Now, we've just got a bit of time for Room 101, Julie.
Gonna put pundits in room at 101 this week, and it'd probably be Gary Neville, actually, sort of droning mank bastard. He was sat between Ange and Roy Keane, probably to keep them apart, because I'm sure I think that might have been an explosive combination if they were together. Can he ever say anything nice about Spurs? I don't think so. You can tell when he's talking about United, it really hurts him, that he's got to criticise them. He sort of has to force himself to say something critical about United, even so. I used to admire him as a player, and when he first started as a pundit, I thought he was mustard, but now I just think, oh, go away, please. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, he can't even say Manchester United properly. Manchester United. He misses out all the vowels and consonants in the middle. Don't understand that. What have you got for Room 101, Barry?
A similar theme if we're talking World Cup. For me, it's Shearer. That way someone has a kind of verbal tick and it sticks with you and you can't stop yourself looking for it, and it comes round all too often. With him, it really is. It's a great goal. It really is. It's a great ball in. It really is. And I just find myself, I cottoned onto it, and now I can't listen to him without looking for it. I dare say if we were all talking for 90 minutes, we'd have little phrases that we keep saying, and it is a bit grumpy old man. But yeah, I also don't think, I think he's there by virtue of the stature he was as a player rather than what he contributes. He doesn't really have a lot interesting to say, if truth be told, no. But he's there as a kind of ornament, He's not, a terrible figure, but I find him a bit annoying.
Kev?
I had a particularly annoying commute to work this morning and a particularly annoying one back, so I'm just going to pick other people on public transport generally, really. Just they were all there today as well. Like the sniffers, the people listening to terrible music without headphones. It's just, and I genuinely at one point this morning was thinking, I should just get some those little packs of tissues and some very cheap headphones and dish them out. And that might make me feel better that I was doing something for them. I was doing something for the public. I just increasingly hate people on, well, no, I don't increasingly hate people. It is just people on public transport.
I was going to say, it sounds like you just want to put people into room 101.
I almost did.
I've got a couple of quickies. One is the word fraud, which has slipped into common parlance on social media. I was watching Emma Raducanu the other day, and she threw away a match, or at least a chance to win a match. And Harry Fatbelly of Stoke was sitting there eating his crisps, watching her on the box, and he said she's a fraud. I thought she won a fucking slam. She won 10 matches and didn't drop a set. And Harry Fatbelly is calling her a fraud. What does a fraud mean? What does it even mean? You're a fraud. You got there fraudulently. She doesn't deserve. I don't like the word fraud. Stop it. And the other one is, this is a real bugbear for me. 100%. No. Should we buy Adam Wharton? 100%. No. The word is yes. That's it. It's enough. If you want to emphasize it, go, yo, yes. And there was someone on telly the other day, and he said he was looking going around a house. He goes, if that was me, I'd 100% put a massive TV on that wall. No, you would just put a TV on that wall. It's not 100%. You don't need the 100%. Use emphasis, use language, use inflection. That's how you say. Don't ever say it anywhere near me. And I have to say, my wife said it the other day, and I have started divorce proceedings. Look, I've got a couple of stupid tweets for you. This one, we'll finish on this. De Zerbi's eye for talent looks questionable and may prove to be a serious red flag for Tottenham Hotspur. He's a good coach, no doubt about that, but his eye for talent is just off. Where the fuck does that come from? Here's another one. This is breaking, by the way. Luka Vuskovic is not, capital letters, in Roberto De Zerbi's plans for the next 3 to 4 years. Capital letters. Tottenham want to either keep Luka Vuskovic, extend his contract, or sell him at a very expensive price. I think Pletigol has covered all the possibilities there. And finally, last one. This is from one of our podcasts. I was going to say rivals, but come on. Tottenham Hotspur that's in capital letters, bold and inverted commas. Tottenham Hotspur Bournemouth midfielder Alex Scott. Bournemouth, however, have set a valuation of 80 million for Scott and are planning to offer the playmaker a new deal. Now we know everything. Now then, that's it. We're done for today. We have got Stevie Perryman, on the podcast next week. Captain, legend, 866 games. Poor guy for Spurs. He'll be on the podcast next week, and he can be quite acerbic. He can be quite pithy. And Julie will no doubt draw that out of him. So we've got all that to look forward to next week. Give us a follow on social media. On X, we are at Nice One Cyril Pod. We've got a website, www.niceonecyrilpodcast.co.uk. All the episodes are on there. And give us a follow or subscribe on the platform of your choosing, and you'll never miss an episode. My thanks again to Julie Welch, to Barry Graham, and Kevin Acott. And we'll see you next week. Come on, you Spurs.
Nice one, Cyril.